hold customers to buy retail goods like a TV, you can go to game, and I work within the cybersecurity team. I've been doing cybersecurity for quite a while. I deal with various topics, so not just around incident management. I also deal with DLP, cyber culture, and my background actually started in IT risk, so I've kind of morphed into the cyber world. I'm very passionate about cybersecurity, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy the problem solving and getting involved in tech, people, processes, and governance. So that's pretty much
cool. Cool, thanks for that intro. I want to start off by just chatting about the whole process. You've been using our MDR service for some time now, but I was actually involved in the initial RFP or the process that you guys went through. And I want you to tell us a little bit about that process, what criteria you kind of put up. You were an interesting use case because you had another provider that you were using and you migrated, or you were kind of doing some window shopping.
Yeah.
So I think you had a base understanding of what you need and some of the caveats that you may have come across. So maybe a double barrel question, tell us about that process and then why you chose our service from that whole process.
Yeah. So as Martin said, we did have another service provider, but we were looking to improve our service and expand it. So we are owned by BNP Paribas, which is a bank in France, and they're obviously heavily regulated in the European Union. There's other regulations like DORA, and so we actually have to deploy their framework. So they take the regulations, they implement a framework, and we take that framework and we have to deploy the requirements locally. And they are quite stringent, and it's not a case of you will try, it's a case of you will deploy and make sure that you are meeting the requirements. So BNP itself has their own internal SOC, so you might ask, well, why did we not use their SOC? So one of the things is that there's a possible latency issue where we might, because incident management has to be quite responsive, we needed to ensure that we had a very responsive team. We need to ensure that we had access locally to someone that we could, or service provider that was very responsive to our needs. We need to ensure that there was stability in the service. So being able to respond to us, to be able to give us the support that we needed, and to be available, because we're also heavily scrutinized by BNP and the services that are managing in terms of our cybersecurity. We also needed to ensure that we've actually got quite a lot of requirements, but I won't go into all of them. Not only just having a 24/7 service where literally someone has to be looking at every event and being able to analyze it and to identify if there's a potential incident or not. It goes all the way to knowledge repositories. Do we have a repository of all the types of incidents? Do we know what can affect us? What is such a key issue to deal with? So there was a whole range. So we actually have like a whole terms of reference. So we are also an on-premise solution. We don't use cloud technology. There's various reasons for that. So it's very difficult to find a service provider that is able to support a full on-premise solution. So even though there is an aspect of cloud, we had to go through a whole cloud assessment as well, and it had to be signed off by BNP, which Enclose was. And then, again, I mentioned the local presence, being very receptive, responsive, and also able to work within our requirements, because there are quite a few. So through that whole process, we went through the RFP process. I was involved in that, and then we chose Enclose.
Great, thanks. And I think maybe touching on all those requirements that you had from BNP, yes, that was quite a thing. And I think, again, it was quite unique in that many of our customers, our MDR customers, they didn't have a solution. So we didn't have that long list of requirements. It was just like, let's get something in. We need to get better.
Yeah.
So you guys were a little bit different, but at the same time, we had to change a few things, and like you said, BNP was like, this is the way it's going to be done. Maybe chat to us a little bit about that ability of us to adapt and fit in with your organization.
So I actually do feel for Enclose. They did have quite a quite a time with us at RCS, try to make it as seamless as possible. We actually had to deploy very quickly. We needed to do the transition from the old provider to the new provider very, very quickly. So as I mentioned, BNP has quite strict requirements that they deploy into all their entities globally. And they have very specific detectors, we call them use cases, that need to be deployed. And one of it was quite tough in the beginning because BNP uses a different SIM technology to what Enclose does. We had to map it on a like-for-like, and we had to prove to PF or BNP that what Enclose was detecting is aligned to their requirements. But it's not just that mapping exercise, we also want them to improve. So Enclose is very good with deploying new detectors, and that was quite a big thing that we wanted. The other aspect that is that's quite cumbersome is the reporting that we do. So Enclose has a very nice monthly report that they provide, but those metrics, we need to extend those metrics and be able to report on other metrics. So Enclose had to change their monthly processes with us to be able to report. And then also there's other requirements around backup solutions, the way the logs are collected, how the logs actually go into the SOC. So there was quite a bit of that. Again, as I mentioned, we are heavily on-prem solutions, so we had to work out how that was all going to look like. But I think on the whole, Enclose has actually had to be quite adaptive to our requirements. They do change. There isn't like a set schedule for the year that says, okay, this is going to happen then. If BNP decides they want to change something, they've got to respond very quickly. So I think in terms of the monthly processes, the way they react to things, yeah, they've done well in that.
Yeah, and it's difficult. As soon as you start introducing bespoke models per customer, it generally costs money. So we have to find a balance. But I think we actually managed to do that quite well with your organization. Maybe just some feedback from you on how the service, you guys have been using it it's over a year now, close to 2 years, I think?
Yeah, almost 2 years.
And I still remember when we initially deployed, you phoned me the one time, or you sent me a mail and you said, I need to tell business why we're not getting so many alerts. Although all the alerts were false positives, they're now seeing a lot less alerts, and they're thinking we're not doing our job, and you had to convince them. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, and maybe just some general feedback on the service.
Yeah. So the prior service that we had would log basically everything as an incident. If you understand incident management, it's not compliance. So what was happening is that a lot of calls were being logged, but they weren't necessarily incidents. And it creates quite a backlog, and you have to have someone that goes through those incidents and to make certain calls around them. But in terms of the service from Enclose, I can definitely say, if I need to ask, say, Martin something, or Gary, or one of the other team members something, they are very responsive. They're able to look at what the challenge is and be able to come up with a workable solution. One of the key aspects that we needed was to be able to have open discussions, be able to be contacted, and I can very definitely say that Enclose has been very responsive to that, very open, very aware of our challenges, very aware of the pressures that we're under, the stress that we have, and just very adaptive. I'm thinking, in terms of other service providers, we weren't quite sure if that would be a good fit for our organization, the culture that we have. So definitely the people element is always underlooked. It's not just about the technology. Any service provider can put in technology, you let it run, but we have more requirements to monitor and make sure that it's working. Even though I can say we can let them carry on, they've also identified some good incidents that we wouldn't have normally been aware of. So in general, just a very positive experience, and I still have very positive experiences with them.
Great, thanks for that. Maybe let's jump off script a little bit, and
Thanks. Thank you.
We've run out of questions here, so I'm going to ask you, maybe, being frank, we always try to be serious with our customers, and where we can improve, we want to make sure that we can actually implement those changes. And I know we have those requirements that we had to meet up with. Is there any other areas that you see in the future, maybe, where you would like us to go? in terms of reporting or whatever case. It's always good to get that kind of feedback.
I think, in general, most MDRs, you would deploy your endpoints that are more security related, your firewalls, your EDR and things like that, your endpoint protection and other technologies, your AD and so forth. But what I'm finding a lot is around other application transactions. So logs that are coming from your web apps, it could also be some internal app that was developed internally, and taking those logs and being able to, analyze those. But the difficulty in that is that it can be so unique. So you can have your web applications, which I know we've been discussing internally, like how we're going to onboard that. So there are certain cases, but you might want something different to another client, so that requires a person to focus, which obviously takes a lot of time away from other things. But that is something that we would in the future start to try and onboard. I would say that's the main thing at this point.
Great. I think our CS team is here. You must log that as a service request, please. Just on that note, I want to chat a little bit about that, because that's the type of feedback that we look for. We have two concepts in our service. One is called service improvements, and so we want to track how we can get better, and we always try to have something that we can get better at, because we believe that there's always something you can improve. Security is a continuous journey. And defense threats, as our team works with customers and look at their the alerts that are getting generated, the cases, we have the defense threats are there to help the customer identify, so that we actually have a bit of a feedback loop. Have you found those useful? Have you guys learned from that? And has the service improvements been to your expectation in terms of driving the service forward?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the one aspect that's also overlooked is when you deploy an MDR, you might find you have a lot of alerts coming through, and it also takes time for the service provider to get on board with your environment and how things operate. So I have found a lot of improvement in the types of incidents that are now being logged, and for us to actually go, because we internally do, as a second line, do our own investigation to close off any incidents. But what I'm seeing is the level of the incident, because Enclose understands our environment more. So I'm just thinking of an example recently where we didn't expect a certain activity to happen, and the MDR solution did pick that up, and we were able to quite quickly identify, was this actual incident or was it not? But it's just that level of understanding your environment and being able to make more informed decisions. So the team knows certain people in our IT operations space, and when they do certain things, they can generally apply some additional judgment to say, well, this is not actually an incident. So before the incidents come to us, there's quite a lot of intelligence applied to that alert, and then making that determination before contacting us. So I think that is one improvement that we look for. The other improvement that you've also met is the additional detectors. So I won't go into much of the technical jargon around that, but we also wanted to improve our capability to have more detectors deployed, so we are picking up more potential incidents. That has been a very big requirement. It was actually part of our RFP. How does the service provider tackle that and do that? So that's another service improvement that I believe.
Great, yeah, and I think to your first point on the panel earlier, we also spoke about MSPs getting to know their customer, knowing the environment so that we can have that context. A very important part of the service, I think. Maybe, you spoke about the deployment, going back to the deployment, and that it had to be really quick, and there was a migration, so there was kind of two things that we dealt with.
Yes.
Was there any surprises there, or were you happy with that, how that played out?
Yep, no, definitely. Again, as I mentioned, we have a lot of strict requirements. What kind of tech you're deploying? Does it, the configuration of the tech, where the infrastructure is, where does it reside? What process you have internally, who the people are. So we work, because we knew we had to do it quite quickly. I don't want to go too much into the previous, but there was, around stability of service and, managing infrastructure. So it had to happen incredibly quickly. We don't have the allowance or the luxury of time to stop an incident management process. So they took it on board. All our processes, the way we wanted our tech to be deployed, how it was going to be monitored. I mean, it took about 6 weeks from ensuring that, okay, obviously we had to roll off our previous supply, but it took about 6 weeks to onboard fully. And then obviously, you start to tune things and tweak things. So it's been almost 2 years. And I think I forgot to answer the question around the IT operations. I'm not sure, not every, no, I think I did, around what actually is an incident versus what's an alert versus what's compliance. So our IT ops team was also heavily reliant on what our service was and was using it more as a change management type capability, not as much an incident management. So your normal changes, if you have privileged or escalation of privileges or something like that, and it's expected as part of a change, it's not necessarily an incident. So you don't want to waste your time dealing with that. You want to know what your incident is. And that, of course, a mass shrinkage of the number of incidents logged. So it was thought, well, okay, enclosures isn't doing their job, they're not identifying alerts. But it wasn't the quantity of alerts, it's the quality of alerts and whether it is actually an incident or not.
Yeah, I think I still remember during the deployment, you guys were pretty adamant about integrating our system into your IT, your ticketing system.
Yes.
Because you were expecting a big onslaught of these alerts to come in.
Yes.
And I was like, don't worry about it. We're not going to have that many tickets that we need to automate this yet. So that was quite a surprise. We got a few more, a minute or so left, a minute or two left. Is there anything else you want to add about the service? Any kind of big surprises for you? And maybe I hate to slag the competitors, but I thought that you guys went through a pretty rigorous process, and you did quite a lot of convincing to change the mindset.
Yes.
I just think that maybe you want to add something about that at all.
So just in terms of my experiences and how that all went, as you mentioned, it was a very quick process. There's a lot of work that happened behind the scenes to bring enclose on, and it wasn't easy. It's if they don't pass this requirement, it's no, they can't go further. So having that level of interaction and how your service is set up and the way it responds to incidents and how we get that communication, that is something that I can't stress. It's not about putting in the technology, which as I mentioned, anybody can do. It's how the business operates in terms of the value that they put on you as a client. How do they want to make sure that your requirements, your needs are being met? It's not easy, it's challenging. We've also had to compromise maybe on a few things, but not in a negative way. And just getting the business on board. It's a change management process. With people, they don't always want the change. But in general, enclose supporting us in that journey, being available, having meetings with your various teams, being open, which is over and above what they typically, the service provider may do. In general, just a very pleasant experience. I wasn't feeling like nothing was going to really go wrong. So I think it did well.
Great. Thanks for that feedback. I think that's a wrap for us, guys. Thanks, Jean, for such short notice coming up here and joining us on the panel.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Martin, and thank you very much to Jean. It was really, really very insightful. Let's move on to one of our next sponsors. That is KnowBe4. We've got a fascinating panel discussion, not a panel discussion, but a discussion on how important AI-powered security awareness and how important that phishing training is. We've heard over and over the weakness of that human equation in all of this today. So we're going to have this session now.